Hello! Today I'm going to give you some ideas of how to dress the corner unit in the craft shed. So I'll be making books, magazines, magazine racks. There's some little snacks on there, box of tissues. Underneath I've made a little bag of rug making supplies. Some more boxes just to fill spaces, a little wooden art box. So lots of little bits, all again really super easy to make and things that I'm sure you've all made before, but it's just really to give you some ideas and inspiration for your own craft shed. And again, this is another lovely packed unit. I'll tell you what we need as we go along, so let's get started. So this is a super easy way of creating a book. And a good way as well if you've got a large shelf to fill or a bookcase for a library or a study or something. And I've just basically scanned in the front and back cover separately, opened them up in Photoshop, and then I've just done a line of text for the spine and then joined those together, so joined those three images together to create the whole cover. And then you want to cut a piece of wood the thickness of the spine here, and this is actually just a millimetre, so I'm using a 0.8 millimetre thick piece of wood, and the height and width of the front cover. And then I'm using a white pencil for these just to colour the edges of the piece of wood to make the sort of edges of the pages, but you could obviously use gold if it was sort of a more expensive book or an older book. Or to make the pages look worn, you could use brown shoe polish. So just colour those in like that. And then you'll just glue in the covers around the piece of wood. So just apply glue to the cover. Make sure you've got your white edges sort of so they're showing. And then you can just wrap the cover around. Make sure there's no wood showing at the front and back. Squeeze it all down. And that can then be left to dry. Just such an easy way of doing it. So that's those. And then another couple I did, books that I actually own. I just made them look a little bit older. So this is an old History of Dolls' Houses book, which is wonderful. And I just rounded off the spine on that one. So just do that by sweeping the piece of wood along a sheet of sandpaper on your desk, just to round that off. Same with this one. And then I used gold on the edge of the wood for the pages in the Queen Mary's Doll's House book, which is another wonderful book. So they'll go in the shed as well. Another super easy little project is magazines and a magazine rack. So for the magazines, again, I just photocopied the front and back cover and made that into one piece. And then I've just stuck a plain piece of paper in the centre there, just folded it and stuck that in the centre just to give it a bit of thickness. And I've also added a couple of post-it note page tabs, because that's what I do in my sort of real size magazines if there's something I want to refer back to. Just one of those tiny little details that you can add. I've done a little show catalogue as well and a D-ball catalogue there. So I've made quite a few magazines. And then for the magazine rack, I'm using 120 gram paper, just in a nice pale green. And I'm going to show you the template now for the magazine rack, and I hope you can see those numbers clearly. If you basically get the height and width correct and just cut yourself the rectangle, then you should be able to work it out from there. So just begin by folding in all the sort of folds in the template, and I use a ruler and just fold them alongside that, just because you get a sharper line. And fold up the little tabs as well. sort of create the basic shape. And then for this again I'm using a piece of spare 5x5 strip wood, 13/64 of an inch. I'm just going to tuck that in front of the back piece there and apply glue to the flap. And you don't have to do it like this, but I just find it keeps it squarer. And then bring that round, make sure the tops are level. And you can just sort of press that all down against the strip wood. Fold in those smaller flaps. And then apply a little tiny bit of glue to each of the flaps. Then glue in one long flap. And then the remaining long flap. And then just pop that down on your work surface and use the piece of strip again just to press all the bottom pieces together. Again, that will keep it all nice and square. And you can let the glue dry off for a moment before you put your magazines inside. So I've also made this little bag to go under the corner unit, and it's a little bag filled with rug making supplies. So you've got the canvas in there, sheet of canvas, a roll of canvas, and then these little skeins of crewel wool. And I just want to show you how to make those because they're really simple. So I'm using crochet cotton, and this is a little tray that I keep in my crochet box. And when each sort of ball of cotton gets low, I put it into this little tray to use up. So I'll start with a pink one. Begin by cutting off a length of cotton, like that. And then I've got here a piece of 2.5mm thick wood, and it's 50mm or 2 inches long. So begin wrapping the cotton round, leaving a sort of long tail that end. And it doesn't matter how many times you go round, but I've been going round 14 times. That just sort of makes a nice thickness for the skein. Like that. And then cut it off again, leaving a long tail. And then knot those two tails. Like that. And then you can trim the ends of the tails away, take it off with a piece of wood, and sort of put one finger in and begin twisting it around. Go as tight as you can, and then sort of let it fold. Try and sort of get it to go in the middle if you can. Like that. Hold the ends together and you can sort of tidy it up a bit. Like that. And then hold on to the sort of neat end and clip off the other end with a clamp. Like that. And then use the piece of cotton that we cut off at the beginning just to tie that together. Like that. You can take it out of the clamp and then snip off those loose threads. So you've got a neater end, which is the end I've sort of used to stick out of the bag, and then the sort of not so neat end which you can hide away. And then I just applied a little bit of glue to the end of each of those and just used tweezers to position them in the bag, so that's all stuck in as well. And the actual bag is the shopping bag, and you'll find the video for that on my channel. Now I've made this one a lot smaller, so just because I wanted it to fit in that shelf like that. I wanted to sit right in there. So I just basically measured the bottom and the width and then the height of the fabric. So that shopping bag design you can make to any size you want to fit in any space. And I think it's a lovely little bag and really easy to make as well. And I've just done a more simple handle here as well. And then I've just done another of the little boxes that I showed you in the work table accessories video. And I've put a little Appleton's Cruel Wool label on the front, which you probably can't see from there, but it's the old traditional label. So that will go under there as well. So I think, I've got one more thing I wanted to show you. This is something else that I keep myself, and it's just a little cardboard wallet filled with some of the mesh. Now I've used the tiniest mesh that I've got and just put a few sheets in there and tucked it inside a cardboard wallet. So I want to tuck that under there as well. So I'm going to glue that all into place now, and then I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so there's everything now stuck into place. And I've decided to have the sewing box underneath and closed. And I couldn't quite fit the sort of envelope of mesh down there, so I've put that up there near the magazine files. And now I just want to show you another really easy way of making a book, and this is a fabric covered one. So I'm using a piece of 3mm sheet wood, and I've rounded off one edge like we spoke about before. And then I've used a gold marker pen to colour in the page edges. And then cut a piece of thin card that is just slightly larger than the book all the way around. It's probably just about 1mm wider at each side, top and side. And then cut a piece of fabric that is about 5mm, or 1/4 inch say, all the way around. So 1/4 inch bigger all the way around. Then apply glue to the card. And this card I'm using is from, I'll show you, like a file divider, like the file divider tabs. So I always keep those when they start to get a bit raggy. And they're a really sort of nice thickness of card to use for miniature projects. And stick that to the wrong side of the fabric. And then just snip off a corner. Snip off each corner, I should say. And never go right up close to the corner of the card, or you'll find you'll have a little bit of a gap once you glue the fabric down. Apply glue to the sides of the card. Glue down the sides of the fabric. And then the long edges. Another one of those gluey finger projects. Stick the corners down as best you can, but if you find you've got any little bits of cotton hanging off, you can just trim those off. But I always find it's better to have fabric to trim off than have cut it too close to the corner and have the card showing. So I'm just going to let that dry off for a moment, and then we just glue it around the book. Once that's dried off, just sort of fold it around, make it a bit more pliable like that, and then apply glue. and then glue the cover around your piece of wood. Squeeze it all together, and then you can tuck those corners in with a spare cocktail stick, or snip them off if they're too big to tuck in. And if you've used a thicker card and that's sort of trying to spring off, you can just use a couple of clamps or clothes pegs, clothes pins to clamp that down. Once again, I'm just going to leave that to dry off for a moment. So I've been onto Excel again, and I've just printed off a little label saying Doll's House Journal, and I use Sago Script 3.5 font. And then I've just cut off a little piece of this lovely sort of canvas fabric, and I just want to sort of tease out a couple of the sort of threads from around the edge, if I can get hold of them, like that, just to make a little backing for the label. So I'm going to stick that onto the front of the book. I'm not using too much glue. I'll just put a little bit in the middle, and then my label will cover that. I'll glue that down at the top there. And then I'm going to glue the label on top of that. You can be really inventive with these little books. Use fabric, ribbon, string. I'm going to put a little bit of string around that as well as a little tie. So I'm using this lovely sort of fine string for the tie, and always cut off a little bit more than you're going to need, so you've got enough to sort of make the bow. I'll put that around the middle there. Make that into a tight knot, and then tie the bow. And then you just want to sort of hold on to the knot to keep it all secure, and then pull the strings to make the bows smaller, and then tighten the bows, pull the string, and just keep going until you've got sort of the smallest bow you can make. And then you can cut your ties, leaving a little bit there to make it look a bit prettier. And you can glue those ties down as well, just so that it all stays in place. A little bit under there. And if the bow is sort of twisting around and won't sort of stay facing the front, you can glue that into place as well, like that. And then I want that to stand over here, so I'll glue that into place, and then I'll show you how to make a little artist's box. Okay, so this is just a super easy little way to make a little wooden box, a non-opening wooden box. So cut two pieces, one for the base and one for the lid, and I'm using 3mm thick sheet for the base, that's 1/8 of an inch, and 1.5 for the lid, that's 1/16 of an inch. So cut them to size, and you can do it any size you like, and I'm just doing it so that it's going to fit exactly on the top of that unit. And then in the thicker piece, the base, I made a pencil mark in the centre, and then I've drilled a 0.75mm hole, 1/32 of an inch, 4mm away on each side, and that will be for the handle. And then you're just going to glue them together, like that, and then use a couple of clamps to hold those together while they dry, otherwise the thinner piece of wood, the lid, will try to curl upwards. In fact, I'm going to use 4. I'll put another couple on there. Excuse my chair squeaking. It is the chair and not my back. Okay, so leave that to dry. So when the glue has completely dried, sand the box on all edges just to make a nice flush piece, and then do this very, very carefully, just using your craft knife. Just score along the join, and that's just so that the join isn't hidden. Along the sides as well, and I've actually already done this, so one more little score. And probably don't do it up like that in the air. I'm just doing that to sort of show you, so have it down on your work surface. And then just use a dressmaking pin just to go into those holes, get any sort of sanding dust out of them. And then I'm going to just give that a coat of clear wax. So I'm just tearing off a piece of kitchen towel. And just rub that in. Small circular motions. You can paint it if you like. It just really brings out the colour of the wood and the grain too, like that. And then just cut a little piece. I'm going to use glove leather. It's got a little tiny piece of leather there, just slightly narrower than the base. And then I'm just going to snip each end into a point. And then use the pin again just to make a little hole in each end, just before the point. And then push the pin all the way through. Do that in both ends. And then use pliers to trim the pin to about 6mm or 1/4 of an inch long. Like that, and then you can just apply a tiny little bit of glue over each hole, and that will just adhere to the leather. Find the hole, push that right in, that one as well. Push them down on your worktop to make sure they're all the way in, and then sort of straighten your handle like that. So really simple little idea, just to make a little art box, and that's going to go on there. Okay, so glued the art box into place, and then I've just added another couple of little boxes, again with some labels that I found on the internet. Spare kitchen towel, and I did keep putting this in to measure to make sure that I had sort of clearance underneath the window ledge, and that fits in there just nicely. And then another couple of bits I've made, because it's always nice to have a little biscuit while you're working. Packet of my favourite hobnobs, and I just again found the label online on Google Images, and that was just a square, so I just coloured the rest of the sort of paper in orange to match the label, and just glued that around a piece of dowel, and then just tucked the ends in there. In the interests of health, a couple of apples, and then a little box of tissues, and again that's just a really simple little box to make, similar to the ones we made in the work table accessories episode. And then you just punch a little hole in the top using your scribe or an awl, and then just tuck a bit of tissue in. And then I've cut a piece of dowel here, and I want to show you how to make a little flask. So this is a piece of 5mm dowel, 13/64 of an inch, and I've cut it 22mm long, or 7/8 of an inch. Take a piece of medium grade sandpaper, and you just want to very gently round off that top edge, and this is just to create the lid, like that. And then to paint the lid I'm using watercolours, and I've mixed a lovely sort of turquoisey bluey green colour here. And the lid will just be about 5mm at the top of the dowel. You can paint a little bit further down than that, like that, and that can then be left to dry. Once the paint has dried, find a nice piece of patterned paper, and again I printed this from the internet. This is a Cath Kidston design, and you just want that to be 17mm high by 23mm wide, and that's 5/8 of an inch by 7/8 of an inch, and then glue that to the bottom of the dowel, or around the bottom of the dowel, making sure that the bottom of the paper is lined up with the bottom. Glue that around like that. And once again, that can be left to dry. And whilst that's drying, I'll just show you a little calendar I made. And the actual calendar part, again, I found on Google, and there's sort of free calendars on there that you can download. I resized that, and I've sized this so it fits exactly in that gap to the left of the window. And then this is a photograph that I took at one of my favourite places, Blenheim Palace, and it's in the grounds, and this was taken one autumn, and the trees there in autumn are just wonderful. I'll show you a few pictures that I've taken. And I just basically joined the two images together in Photoshop and then resized the whole thing. Glue a few sort of blank pages at the back just to give it a bit of thickness, and then I just used a scribe to punch a little hole in the top there, which I'm not sure you can even see on camera, just to look like a little nail hole. And I'm going to glue that directly to the wall. Okay, so once the paper has dried, I'm going to use cotton just to create that sort of metal rim that you get around the bottom and around the underneath the lid of a flask. And I'm using my crochet cotton, but you could use any sort of embroidery thread or cotton. And it's a little bit tricky, so I'm going to apply just a line of glue starting around the base. You really only want just a little touch around there, like that, and then find where your paper joins, and that will be the back of your flask. So we want the cotton to sort of end there as well, and then just lay it around the very edge. And I've cut it a little bit longer than I needed. And when you get round there, you can trim it off. Just stick that down. And it's a tiny little detail again, but it just finishes it off, otherwise it just looks like a piece of dowel covered in paper. And then you want to do the same thing again around the lid join. And you can just use the tip of a cocktail stick to remove any excess glue. Okay, so I just want to show you one more thing, and that is this pattern book. This is where I keep all the measurements of everything I make, and they get nice and tatty, and I put tags in, and the mouldings I stick in masking tape. So I want to recreate this in 1/12 scale. So I've just cut a piece of black card for the cover, and then I just actually photocopied an open page, and the printer was playing up, so I just kept pressing print, and then it came out 3 times, so I've actually got 3 pages to use. Normally I would just use a little bit of blank paper underneath. So when you're doing an open book, always begin by folding it in half, so always create the fold, Squeeze that in like that. And the same as well with the pages. I'll do those 3 together. Like that. And then you just want to glue in the sort of backing pages. Leave the top page there for a moment. And only sort of apply a little bit of glue along each side of the spine. You want the pages to look loose. Like that. Oops. One like that. And then the book actually has a piece of ribbon. It's fallen off in mine, but I'm going to put one in here. So I've got a piece of 2mm ribbon here. I just want to cut off a strip. I'm just going to fold up those pages. Should have actually did this before I stuck the pages in. Just stick that there like that, a little bit of glue there. And then press that in. Fold that over. And just trim that off. Like that. And I'll actually have that over the page that I'm on. And then in all of my books I use a lot of sort of post-it notes and things to mark pages. So I've got some little sticky markers here, and I'm just going to cut a little tiny bit off of each one. And it would just be really, really thin. Just want that little top piece like that. Tiny little bit of glue on the page. Stick that in up there. And use a little bit of green as well. Like that. Bringing in the final page, or the top page. Glue that in like that. And then you can sort of curl the edge of the top page. You might want a page perhaps to be sticking up. Curl that over like that. And then I want the ribbon on this page. I'm going to put a little tiny bit of glue just on the back of it there. And stick that down. And then I kept one of the little pencils out of the desk tidy, and I'm just going to glue that into place as well across the book, like that. Now I'll just go and pop that into place. So there's the pattern book in place, and if you remember I put a little template there of that size and sort of fitted the tins and things around it, so I knew that would fit there. And there's the unit in place. And also I kept measuring so that those boxes would fit beneath the window ledge, so make sure you do that as well if you're sort of piling boxes up on there. The calendar as well, I think that looks really nice in that corner. And it's all coming together really nicely now, really starting to fill up. I also made a little radio, which you can see there on top of the filing cabinet. And the pattern for that radio is in my book, Making Doll's House Miniatures in 1/12 scale. You'll find the tutorial for that in there. I hope you've enjoyed this latest video. Not so much of a tutorial as a sort of ideas video really. All little simple bits and pieces, easy to make. And if you enjoy making your own doll's house furniture and miniatures, you might like my books. I've published 4 of them so far, and they're all available to purchase from Amazon, so I'll pop a couple of links below. And for now, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.